Okay, so we want to be able to page our results, and there's a few different approaches to pagination. We could either have the numbered approach that Google uses to page through a numbered list of results, so you go on to page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Or there's the Twitter approach, which is to use vertical paging, and the nature of our application suits vertical paging, so that as we go down the screen we add more and more activities. So let's take a look at how we can set this up. So we'll go to our activity dashboard to do this, and we'll need to bring in the pagination params, the set pagination params or set paging params, and the pagination as well from our activity store. And what we'll also do is we'll add some local state so that we can see if we're loading the next batch of activities. So we'll add a property for loading next and set loading next, and we'll set this equal to use state. And then what we'll do is we'll create a helper function in here called handle get next. And in here we'll set the loading next and set it to true. We'll set our paging params, and we'll pass in a new paging params object, and we'll pass in the current pagination and the current page, and we're going to add 1 to this. We want to get the next page. Now we're getting some complaints. The set loading next is telling us that it doesn't know what type it is, and we'll give this an initial value of false. And our paging params is complaining because the pagination, because of the types that we've used in our store, it could possibly be null. So what we'll do is we'll just add the exclamation mark there. And we've got another complaint because our constructor, or we don't have a constructor in our paging params class, so it's telling us that we can't pass it an argument. So let's go back to the pagination.ts file, and what we'll do is we'll remove the initial values from here, and we'll create a constructor, and we'll say page number equals 1 and page size equals 2 as the initial values. And then we can just say list.pageNumber equals page number, and we can say list.page size equals page size. And these properties are still going to be optional. We can leave them off because we're giving them an initial value inside the constructor. So back to the activity dashboard, we should have removed all of our warnings, and we have. We'll still need the exclamation mark. We're still going to get the warning about the object possibly being null. So we do need the exclamation mark there. And what we can do then, now that we've set our pagination params, is we can say load activities, and we don't need to pass that any parameters because it's getting its parameters from the store itself. So when we update our pagination params, that's going to cause our Axios computed property to be updated, and that's what we pass to our load activities. So we don't need to actually add any parameters in here because our store is taking care of what this needs to go and get the next batch of pages. So in the len, we'll add a callback inside here after that method has completed to set loading next and set it to false. So what we'll do temporarily, just to make sure this functionality works, is we'll just add a button underneath our activity list to demonstrate this functionality. So we'll bring in a button from Semantic UI, and we'll just make it floated to the right, and we'll give it some content equal to more ... We'll make it positive. We'll give it an on-click event handler, and we'll say handle get next. We'll give it a loading flag equal to loading next, and we'll disable the button if there are no more pages, and we can get that quite easily from our pagination property and the total pages, and see that if this is equal to pagination.currentPage. Because if it is, of course, we know there's no more pages to get from our API. So we should be able to go test. So let's go take a look, and yeah, let's just refresh this page. It looks a bit of a mess, and the page works fine after a refresh. So we can see our more button, and if we click on this, what we'd expect to see is our next two activities load inside here. So let's take a look. We see our loading indicator. That's not good user experience, but we'll address that soon. But then we can see the next two activities. And if we click more again, we should keep seeing more and more activities until we get to the end of our list. And there's a few more to go. So after future activity 7, what I want to see is the last activity, because there's 11 in my list, and I want to see this button disabled. And if I go down to the bottom, I can see future activity 8, buttons disabled, perfect. But the experience is terrible, obviously. If this full page refresh every time that we click on the button is obviously not good enough, but we can easily get around that by just making sure that the loading initial only returns this if we are not loading next. So we'll just add a double ampersand and say if we're not loading next, then do the full page loading. But if we are, then we're not going to use that. We'll just use our loading on the button indicator. So if we just go back, just take a look, I'll just refresh the page. And if we click on the More button, this spins and displays the next activities. And that's a cleaner approach. But it's not clean enough. All of the cool apps would use a infinite scroller for this kind of pagination and would not require the user to actually click on a button. So that's what we'll look at implementing next, a kind of infinite scroller. So as the user scrolls down the page, they can load the next batch of whatever it is.